What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you an early preview of Capes, an upcoming TRPG set around a group of superheroes who have been outlawed and are trying to fight back against an evil corporation of supervillains. That said, this isn't actually the first time I've taken a look at Capes, though last time was via a public demo, whereas now, due to the game's upcoming release on May 29th, the publisher of the title, Daedalic Entertainment, offered an early preview consisting of the entire first chapter of the title. Though that was actually a little while ago, the embargo for that lifted back in April on the 20th to be specific, so I'm a little behind on this one. But nonetheless, let's dive into it and talk a bit about what this game has to offer. So, right away, this game is inspired by games like 2002's Freedom Force, more recently Midnight Suns, and always with TRPGs XCOM. So you'll see a lot of the DNA of those types of games, but the gist of it is we are using superheroes in a more traditional TRPG setting. Ultimately, the game will come with 3 different difficulty modes: casual, normal, and hardcore. Pretty much what you would expect, but probably worth a mention that casual reduces difficulty by buffing you rather than reducing enemy capability. Whereas hardcore mode gives you less health, causes any hero KO to fail the mission, and preventable attacks will deal more damage to you as well. Now let's talk a little more about the story and what exactly happened here. So this game takes place in King City. About 20 years back or so, the corporation, or the company as it's known, won the battle between supervillains and superheroes. Previously, superheroes were still not technically legal, but did their part in protecting the city, but this apparently fostered a bit of resentment from people like the local government and the police, who started looking for alternatives to superheroes and found an option in the company, which is really just supervillains. However, with local support, these supervillains were successful in outlawing superheroes, and now they are basically hunted down and killed, though some are also shipped off to some undisclosed location. Now, obviously, if you're someone still manifesting superhero powers, that's not quite the fate you want, and thus a bit of a resistance is formed around an older hero known as Doctrine, which is where our heroes come in. Now that's the basic plot setup, but I do think now that we have access to a bit more of it via Chapter 1 here that it gets a little more interesting than you might initially think, as there are some early cutscenes, so not much of a spoiler here, that explain that the city is actually a bit of an anomaly. Superheroes are still going strong everywhere else, and in fact they are even known to deal with the federal government. King City seems to be a bit of a microcosm of what's actually happening here, and an attempt to springboard things even farther. Now for our part, we're ultimately going to wind up controlling, I believe it is 8 superheroes in total, but we start the game with Facet and Rebound before quickly picking up Mindfire and chasing down a speedster known as Mercurial. Perhaps unsurprisingly, we'll be taking these heroes in mission-oriented turn-based combat, where we will be utilizing their individual powers, of course, but also how they interact with each other as a team to fight off waves of company goons to accomplish some goal. And while a great deal of this is obviously combat-oriented, there are some stealth missions which I was happy to see, and I'm curious if it involves more than just Rebound. Rebound is our teleporting hero that seems to be an assassin of sorts, and thus does great at backstabbing enemies for maximum damage. Perhaps, as you might expect, heroes themselves seem to be divided into a few different categories of battle role, if you will. For instance, Facet is meant to be a tank, so he doesn't deal a lot of damage, but he's great at forcing enemies to attack him for minimal damage. Then you have ones like Mindfire, which are all about dealing maximum damage and debuffing enemies to take even more damage, which is certainly interesting. But then there's a sort of specialist category, which is where heroes like Weathervane wind up, who can position enemies and deal a bit of AoE damage even. So let's talk about how that works a little more mechanically. Like a great many TRPG, we are dealing with movement points and action points. You can move as many times as you have movement points, but you can only take a couple of different actions, and you can't take the same one twice in any given round. Now, what actions are available to you, of course, depends on your character and also where you are standing. For instance, Rebound's movement is a teleport, whereas Facet's is of course just moving, and then every character has access to a disarming ability, which will take the weapons away from the company goons and prevent them from shooting you, which will typically do more damage than just a melee hit. Now, where this starts to get a little more fun is with team combos and ultimate abilities. Now, team combos are pretty straightforward. They are unique combinations of individual heroes' powers to make a specific move a little more powerful than it would otherwise be. For instance, if Rebound is near Facet, they can team up and she can stab an enemy in the back with one of his crystals for extra damage. Whereas if Facet is near Rebound can teleport him farther than he would normally be able to walk, helping you position your tank a bit, just to give a few examples. And it's through all of those interactions that the game manages to retain that tactical feel, and I'm curious how complicated these missions might get over the course of the game at this point. Now, in between missions, you'll be headed back to your hub area, which is known as the Lodge. This is where we're going to do things like advance the story, see conversations between our individual heroes, and of course, upgrade our characters. Now, when you complete a mission, you'll potentially complete a bunch of optional objectives that reward skill points for having done so. These skill points, in addition to the ones you earn from completing hero challenges, that is to say taking specific actions with certain heroes to unlock more skill points, lets you spend those skill points on upgrading or acquiring new skills for them, which is a little bit level gated, as well as you have to meet certain minimums before you can purchase any upgrades at all. But the gist of it is pretty straightforward. So that, alongside with just the recruitment of new heroes, seems to form the backbone of the progression systems, and overall it seems pretty fun. Now, in regards to the preview specifically, before we wrap this up, I will say that now that I've actually gotten a hint at the story, it does seem a lot more interesting than the base setup, as some of the cutscenes and things you learn in Chapter 1 here do seem to make it a bit more intriguing than it might normally be. And then as for the combat, it's pretty enjoyable. Now, I play a lot of TRPGs, so I've seen a lot of these systems at play before, but I do like the tactical feel of it, and I especially like how they managed to combine the hero powers to make something unique and do certain things with certain heroes because their powers interact with another's in a certain way, and that combined with a limit on how many heroes you can bring into any given mission as opposed to all 8 makes for some interesting situations there tactically. And I'm excited to see that unfold over the course of the game, especially with missions like Stealth, for instance, that I think have the potential for a lot of fun. Now, on the flip side of that, I will say that the animations seem a bit janky, and they often mix the 3D model storytelling with then more comic book drawing figures of your individual characters having a conversation, so that can be a little odd at times. So certainly a few things to be leery of. Overall though, I like what I see in this preview. And given that people asked me to review Freedom Force, the old 2002 TRPG that has a similar concept, I think this game might just manage to find an audience. But that is pretty much going to do it for this particular video. I certainly hope you enjoyed it, hope you found it informative, and do let me know down below what you think of the upcoming Capes. Remember, it releases on the 29th of May. But that does, of course, mean to like, comment, subscribe, all that YouTube jazz. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.